Hey, everybody. I am back, as is Father Ted. It has been a long time. As many of you know, I've had a surgery and I was out for almost 12 weeks at this point, just coming on here a few times. But happy to be back with my uncle and Father Ted talking about a new Midwestern Pope. Pretty big news, Uncle Ted.
Mhm.
Um, what are your initial thoughts when you heard who it was?
I was surprised. I was surprised because he wasn't one of the major ones that they talked about so often, but
Mhm.
extremely happy because he's a man who has had so much experience and comes from America. We were so surprised to see an American. We never thought that, but
Mhm.
he has he sort of continues the tradition of Pope Francis.
Yeah.
That's the main thing that I thought was um, so good. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're coming to us from Ohio. I'm in Indiana right now. What does it mean to have someone born in the Midwest be representing the 1.4 billion Catholics out there, having a new boss who's from the Midwest?
Right. Yeah. So I'm from New York, and New York is part of my DNA. But being in Ohio for so many years, I've come to appreciate it and gradually understand the way the Midwest thinks and works. So. Oh,
Mhm.
it's just great to have someone with the accent and the experiences that I've come to like experience. It's a gift. It's
And
a wonderful gift. Yeah.
yeah, interesting you say accent because one of the things that I noticed pretty soon, which when watching his first address to the square there in the Vatican, was that he spoke in Italian, he spoke in Spanish, but he didn't speak in English.
Mhm.
What do we make of that? What do you make of that?
He did speak in one of the major talks in English, but he has to speak in mainly Italian because he's the Bishop of Rome. So he's speaking right to his own people. So
Mhm,
luckily, he speaks Italian very well. So
mhm.
Um, he won't lose his American Midwestern culture. I think it's a
Yeah,
part of him. Yeah.
yeah. And so you said, just to talk about you for a moment, give people a little bit more background and depth on you, especially because we haven't been on the air for some
Mhm.
time. Um, you said you're from New York. You're part of the Society of Mary, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that means. And
Mhm.
teach at Dayton University now uh, uh,
Mhm.
as a Dayton Flyer, but have spent a long time in the Midwest. We're in Cleveland for a whole long time too, doing some pretty important and intense work there.
Mhm.
Yeah. So first of all, what does it mean to be part of the Society of Mary, and the Pope is an Augustinian. What does that mean?
Mhm.
Can you help people understand why
Mhm.
someone like yourself would become Marianist versus Franciscan versus
Mhm.
an Augustinian?
Sure. So he he's an Augustinian. The Augustinians were founded way back in the 1400s. There were a lot of hermits around, and one of the popes got them together and asked them to live together. So he was known as a mendicant order. They weren't monks. They just didn't live in a monastery. And mendicant means you beg for your survival. But then they became preachers, and they followed the rule that Saint Augustine had started way back in the 400s of what it means to be a religious together. Even in his talk on Sunday to the people, he called the young people of the church to follow the call to be priests or to be religious, and because it's such an extraordinary way of helping, and you know mendicant or the Augustinians have really studied theology and been able to preach well to help people understand what's going on in history and what's going on in society. And I'm a member of the Marianists. The Marianists started in 1817. So we're kind of younger than they are, but we live in community. Religious live in community, take the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And that it is to say, well, is a call from God that we all have a call from God to be who we are, to be authentic and to love. But some people are called really to spend their lives, helping the spiritual life of people, helping us all to care for the poor, to care for those who are, that if you're not married, you might have more time to care for. So religious are those who, especially the Augustinians or the Marianists, were active, were involved, but we live this vow of life together. Poverty meaning you just try not to, live simply, and all the funds that you have, you share with the community and use that for the ministry. So those are some thoughts that come to my mind. Yeah.
Got it. And this idea, if we could back up this word mendicant, somewhere in my Catholic school upbringing, this word is ringing a bell. I don't think I've heard it for a very long time, but it means for someone that has to purposefully is existing purely on charity. Correct?
Right. You beg. You don't really live. Earn a living for yourself, but you spend your life for others, and therefore you ask for other people to support you, or support your community. Yeah.
And what's the religious meaning of that? How does that bring you closer to God?
Well, we all live, whether you work or have a job or you're a doctor, and we all have to have jobs. But if and some people, spend their lives doing, even though they are not religious, they spend their lives especially doing nonprofit work. It's kind of a special call, and some of the young people I talk to, they really want to do that with their lives. They see that they're called, they have special gifts, and they'll make it just enough money, as much as they need. But we're all called. We're all called to have that. How do we help people? But religious, the tradition of religious is to live these vows. If you don't get married, then you obey in a sense, you live in community as brothers and sisters, and it's a wonderful way of life. I love this life. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more. Why do you love this life? Because you are someone who certainly enjoys life, certainly seems to every day find the goodness in life. So yeah, what is it about living in community, being a religious, that brings you happiness?
Right now in my life, I'm getting older, so I have to slow down. And what I'm finding now, I have to stop back and stop producing as much as I just listen to what's going on. And so when I do that, I can see the goodness of students, goodness of the brothers I live with. And also all of my life, I've worked hard to be a teacher, to be a priest, and create communities. I love being a pastor. But it's not me. I'm not the one that has the source of that. You try to listen to what God wants of me. And it's hard because I'm selfish at times, and I get into these habits of caring for myself. So you keep trying to get at it. But what I've found is the more I pray or listen to the brothers I live with, I keep finding ways of not being selfish, of how do I care for listening, like you listen to students or I listen to my family, and what do they need? I'm not going to pressure them, but how do I relate to them to see their value? When I work with students, I hear a lot of confessions, and they come in sad and guilty, and they don't see the goodness they have, and you have to help them see even though they made some mistakes, the future that they have, and the mistakes don't identify them. and they have what is known as a true self, who they really are. So you keep
Yeah.
helping people discover that.
Well, let's go into that. I want to talk a little bit more about go into the Pope, but I think you hit on something that we've had conversations about,
Mm-hmm.
and lately we talk a lot about. I talk about how my father instilled this in me that, and you did, and my mother. I particularly think about my father's work with the homeless, and he talked about how people are on a journey, and when you meet them, they can be anywhere on that journey, and you don't know. They could be on their worst day or their best day, and likely somewhere in between,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, realizing that and trying to listen to them and meet them where they are, and not judging them by where they are on that day, but
Mm-hmm.
trying to sit back and say, how can we say who they are today so we can make tomorrow better, is something that's dictated his life, and I think mine and yours a lot. And we started talking about how confession and hearing a history from as a doctor, sometimes are pretty similar, right? You're hearing and listening and learning about very intimate things
Mm-hmm.
that people wouldn't really tell anybody but their doctor, wouldn't tell anybody but their priest, right? Of what's happening, maybe not even their own family members, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a privilege, that's a gift. There's a vow that I take. I don't know if you have a vow specific to that, of keeping that privacy,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and hold that vow pretty dear. But I don't think about the vow in the moment so much as the person in front of me,
Mm-hmm.
what they need, the respect that they need, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how I can make tomorrow better than today.
Mm-hmm. Now, by the way, I have a great respect for your father, who got into social work. He was in the military, did a good job there, but he spent his whole life trying to, build up the Salvation Army in the New York area, Brooklyn area, and then worked for the Catholic Diocese of in social work. So he's just a wonderful person, your father.
Yeah,
I'm sure he
done a
passed
lot,
it on to you.
special.
But for me, it is a sort of a privilege to, and it's hard work. Like when I preach, you have to figure out where are the people, what are they thinking. Like recently, I've been preaching about some of the things happening in society, like what happens to the immigrants, or what happens to people who are not given habeas corpus, or the rights of trial. So, how do you help people want to preserve those inalienable rights, but not offend them or not make it political? What is going on in their minds? So I was preached a couple of weeks ago to a community, a lot of elderly people, and I said to myself, all of those people really know that they want to pass on to their children and grandchildren what is authentic. So I said to them, what do you want to pass on? What does this country want to pass on to our children? And can we be bold enough? The gospel was, the writings were about the first Christians who were very bold, not being manipulated by the leaders of the time. So are we bold enough to find the truth that we want to pass on, and not be afraid because of political fears or situations, or we have so many slogans and banners and emotional pulls? But what is the truth? What is the truth we want to pass on, and to do it boldly? But you can't offend people by telling them what to do. But even with students, talking with students, they find them their own. They have to find it themselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This idea of being bold today, I think, is different even from 20 years ago, and certainly
Mhm.
before that. I think it fluctuates of what bold means. You talk about um, the Pope being an Augustinian, being coming from this
Mhm.
order that is based off of begging for your existence, right? Begging for your sustenance, having others, being dependent on others, and putting yourself in that situation. I think in kind of modern politics, that's not seen as very bold. That's seen as quite the opposite. But I think if you step back, I can't think of a more bold way to live your life than to kind of give yourself completely over to others, give yourself over to the natural order of things, give yourself over to society to support you so that you can support the spiritual life of others. So.
I think of you as a doctor. I was in the medical emergency room about 6 months ago, and I was with one particular nurse. He was just so energetic, working all night long, helping, giving all kinds of tests, one after another. He just loved his job. And I could see that when you really find out what you're called to do and you become good at it, you just grow in love. And it's a gift from God to have that kind of understanding of who you are. And so working with the college students now, they're really tempted to go into a life of drinking too much and playing around too much, and it's struggle, but in their hearts they know what they have to be, and their parents know what they want them to be, but it's a struggle for them to find that.
Yeah. Uncle Ted, I took this new job recently, and it's certainly not a prestigious job, right? Which has been something that I've had in the past in these, world-class institutions and working at the top of the game, and publishing research and things like that. And I took this job just recently, which brings me much closer to individuals and to the community, working in an emergency department that kind of is a catchment for people in rural areas, especially in the communities that I live. And it's slower, and I get to spend time. I get to really sit down and cross my legs and actually talk to people a lot more in depth, and get to know them. And this idea of being with people on their journey and trying to think, okay, this is not the best day of their life when they're coming in, and the way they're acting, what they're doing, maybe they're mad, maybe they're angry, maybe they're short, they're in pain. They just had something terrible happen to them, whatever it might be. Just that moment of realization. I just click of time I give myself to say, okay, this person needs my full attention. They need a second chance. They need to heal. And for that to happen, I need to go slow and listen. And I think, again, getting back to this idea of what it means to be part of a religious order, what it means to be part of community, what it means to be someone like yourself who's giving their life to others, and you talking about how you're getting older and finding yourself needing to listen more, and getting into the Pope and the type of order that he's in, as well as this idea that Francis started, that I think the new Pope will continue, around making sure that bishops are listening to their congregation. This theme of listening, I hope, can be something that we can all learn from and maybe flourish over this next decade or two.
So before I talk about that, do you know the story of the last words of Pope Francis? This is the story. So he had a nurse that he got very close to. And this nurse's name, I can't remember exactly, was something like Maximilio Scarpabali, or Italian name. And he had great confidence in him for the last couple of years of his life. And he was very well known as a very good nurse, and had people respected him. But the day before he died, Pope Francis said to him, "You think I can go out and be with the people on Easter Sunday, I think, Easter Sunday on the Pope Mobile. And the nurse said to him, "Oh, Holy Father, you could do it, try it." So he went out. And then that night, before he went to sleep, he said to the nurse, "I want to thank you for taking me to the square." I guess he said it in Italian. And those were the last words that he used. And he died that night of heart attack, I think. And so the relationship that he had with that nurse was like a symbol of how we relate. We really relate by intimacy and appreciation of each other. So that just came to my mind as you were talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the professions that we chose, yes, but as you're talking about, it's also about daily life, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring that into your daily life? And honestly, I'm better at it when I'm in the medical setting than I am when I'm home with family or with friends or in the
Mm-hmm.
world, right? Because you're there, you're focused on it. It's something,
Mm-hmm.
the calling is there, and so that's your job. And I'm much more focused on this idea of listening
Mm-hmm.
and othering. Yeah, but bringing that's a wonderful story to bring into your daily life of this
Mm-hmm.
idea of listening and loving.
Yeah. One of the, I think you were getting into this top, what the legacy of Francis. It's what is known as synodality. And he saw all the problems in the church, all the problems in the world. He constantly traveled. He took 47 trips. Um, and he tried to help people see the problem, but he wanted to help build bridges. How do you build bridges? How do you create dialogue? So he created for the Catholic Church a process, and it's called synodality. And we were so happy to hear Pope Leo say he's going to continue that. But the word synod means council. And for centuries, the church has met in councils to solve problems. In the Catholic Church, we say the Nicene Creed every Sunday, and that comes from the council, and I think it was 350. But so for the last 4 years, Francis has set up a whole process of bringing leaders of the church together to figure out these are the problems of the church. How do you take care of this pedophilia problem that priests are guilty of? How do you take care of women? How do you take care of the authority of a bishop? What is the place of the laity? And so they met for 4 years, especially the last 2 years and the whole month of October. And they came up with about 20 issues that are the main issues. And the process they used was they would sit at round tables, and the Pope did this too for 4 weeks in each October. And they would insist that everybody state their opinion of the issue, and then everybody say they heard what the others said. Then they would try to hash out the problem. And so that process, we want now every diocese, every church, every institution to use that process to listen to each other, to listen to God's Spirit. What is God saying to us? And then by doing that, they became friends. And so now one of those 20 issues was the authority of a bishop. And now the bishop has to listen to the people. He has to be evaluated by the people. That's a whole new thing in the Catholic Church.
How does one get involved in that? How do I, talk to my bishop?
Well, by the way, a lot of the bishops are slowly getting into this.
Yeah,
Some
I'm
of
sure it's harder it's hard. It's a hard thing to ask of people.
Yeah, but you take right now the diocese. We have a wonderful process called Beacons of Light, and the pastors are trying to get people together and forming committees and saying, well, this is a problem we have to work on in our community, or
Okay.
so it takes people willing to get together and share with each other. But that's the future, not only in the church, it's the future in the government or in society, working together.
Hmm.
Mm.
Okay. So I'd like to look into what it is in the Archdiocese of Louisville, which is where
Mhm.
we are. It'd
Mhm.
be interesting. I think a lot of our listeners are from the Kentuckiana area,
Mhm.
even more becoming from the Dayton, Cincinnati area too,
Mhm.
with this triangle between Cincinnati,
Mhm.
Louisville, and Lexington, or
Mhm.
also including Bloomington. This kind
Mhm.
of area is where our listenership is really starting to take hold. So it'd be interesting to look further into where those dioceses are on that process. So we'll do that. But synodality, another vocab word. I feel like we should have a running vocab
Mhm.
uh, on the side. It's just a completely aside. I remember finding a book of your brothers, of
Mhm.
Bob's,
Mhm.
where on the back cover, uh, inside cover, he just had every vocab word from that book that he was learning, and
Mhm.
then found there were a whole set of books after
Mhm. Mhm.
he passed or he moved, and we found them. And every single book, he put all the vocab words in the back in order to
Wow.
learn. I don't
Mhm.
know if you knew that practice
I didn't.
yeah, completely aside. But I feel like I need to do the same thing for mendicant and synodality and all these
Mhm.
things that we're learning.
Mhm.
So the Pope, getting back to the Pope, is Augustinian. It's part of this idea of um, depending on others.
Mhm.
It seems like the foundation of the order that he's part of. Again, this there's this tension between depending on others and being the shepherd of 1.4 billion people,
Mhm.
uh, at least in the way that we think about boldness today. So, does that tension mean anything to you? Can you help us make sense
Mhm.
of that?
So the tension of caring for the larger population of the church and against what?
So you're talking about being an Augustinian, and before that, being a
Mhm.
mendicant and being someone
Mhm.
who is
Mhm.
dependent essentially on society, and now rising to a place where uh,
Mhm.
you are responsible for society in
Mhm.
many ways. There's a bit of a tension there.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, what comes to my mind is he's a follower of Saint Augustine, and Saint Augustine, I would say, from what I know about him, studied about him, his major struggle was really understanding the love of God. So he lived in Milan, and he had a concubine, and he was not a member of the church, and his mother prayed for him all the time that he would be, join the church. And finally, he went to the bishop there, Bishop Ambrose, who was a really holy man, and he began to listen to Ambrose. And then he realized that love is something uh, way beyond, relationships with a man or a woman is a love, but a deeper love is what every human being has. And our hearts are restless until they rest in you. That was his famous phrase. So then he realized that he could give his life to that love, Augustine, and he was brilliant. And so he became a bishop and he studied the philosophies of Aristotle and Plato, and then he wrote enormously. He wrote a whole book on the two cities of one city of God and city of the world. And you had to live the city of God. In other words, what is God saying to us? And how we live this life of God, and yet you have to live in the city and take care of all the affairs of human nature. So the present Pope Leo comes from that tradition. The rule that Augustine wrote was to help the mendicants or the men or that followed him follow that same love, and put it into practice. So I think Leo, will he will understand that his role is to help people live in those two cities. How do you live in what is God's love calling each one of us to do?
Yeah.
In a general, I guess, so that's my general. It's of course there's a tension. What
Yeah.
we do, we do try to live in what is authentic. Yeah.
I think this tension is important to talk about and to always hold. It's in so many places in our daily lives. It's in so many places in the foundation of our daily lives. It's part of the foundation of the Constitution, right? It's part of
Mhm.
the foundation of our politics, of having these two parties always in tension, and the two views in tension. And how do we hold both true in order to move forward in a way that everybody is maybe
Mhm.
not happy, but everybody's viewpoints are considered. So this idea of vagaries, of grayscale, of tension, it doesn't really translate in modern sound bites on
Mhm.
140 plus times two characters on Twitter, etc. So I think this moment of a new pope, this moment of Leo coming to rise to be a shepherd is a moment for us to kind of take that back a little bit,
Mhm.
and have this idea of, okay, things aren't as black and white as we always make them out to be. And so I'm loving that, right? Because that's part of
Mhm.
my message politically very often is, how do we find a way to all work together? Can we talk about Leo? Why Leo?
Mhm.
Where's that name come from?
Sure.
Uh,
Mhm.
there seems to be a whole bunch of Leos before this. Is
Mhm.
it about that, or is it about please,
Sure.
enlighten us about Leo?
So he chose the name Leo because Leo the 13th was in the latter part of the 19th century, and he wrote an encyclical called Reverum Novarum, a new way of thinking. And his whole encyclical was they were going through the Industrial Revolution at the time, and society had to find a new way of adjusting to how you care for workers.
Mhm.
How do you set up systems of finance that help workers? So that was the beginning of Catholic social teaching. So, and he, Pope Leo said the other day, he said, one of the problems now is artificial intelligence. That's going to be the new industrial, something like the industrial problem of the late 1800s, because that could control us. If we do everything technically by what the algorithms say in artificial intelligence, or we're fighting wars by just using that, and creating weapons, and it could be extremely dangerous. And so, yeah, what he's saying is you have to bring a morality and a relationship into that difficult problem. And so he's trying to say, by that name, we relate to each other not just by the technology that we have, because technology can take us over. I read the other day that I heard on the other day that in Japan there's not enough births, and people are moving from the small towns and into the cities, and they're so busy
Yep.
they don't want to have children anymore. They're not even getting married anymore. So that is a danger for society, to live into the technology. So he's trying to say we have to all face that situation.
Yeah. And so he's setting a vision, talking about the problems that need to be solved. Obviously, setting this vision of kind of bringing the church together. Living, uh, building bridges, right? Taking Francis's idea of
Yeah.
47 trips, building bridges, synodality,
Mhm.
and living that and continuing that. And that's a vision, right? And I've been a CEO and founded a number of startups here. And you set this vision, you set this mission so that everybody knows what, one of my colleagues, one of my co-founders says, um, you want to know what people are doing when no one's looking, right? So in order to have that happen, those people need to have the shared vision so that when they're out on their own, out in the world, and they need to make a decision, can always
Mhm.
fall back on what are we actually trying to achieve. So
Mhm.
that's super important. But
Mhm.
then operationalizing that also has to do with leadership and having people around you that will
Mhm.
uh, uh, make that vision a reality. So a couple things on that. One is I understand Leo's old job was something around working and placing bishops throughout the
Mhm.
world. And I wonder if
Mhm.
you tell us exactly what that was, because it feels like that puts him in a very special position to have the people
Mhm.
that he's working with understand, what it is that
Mhm.
was done to effectuate the vision.
So he was, educated. He was born in Chicago, then he went to Villanova University, then he became an Augustinian because that's the Augustinians at Villanova University. Then he became a friar. I think he worked in a parish for a while, but then he went to the mission in Peru and he was there for 20 years working with the poor people in Peru and became a bishop there. Um, then I guess Pope Francis heard about him and he called him to Rome and appointed him to be the head of the Curia office of appointing bishops. So he had the responsibility for the last 2 years of appointing new bishops. So he became very knowledgeable. That's probably one of the reasons why he was chosen, because a lot of the bishops knew him. So uh, I do have a sense of what you're saying is when you run a business, you really have to be aware of the bigger picture and the immediate picture. So he seems to have that kind of administrative skill.
Hmm.
I hope so. I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
everything will be seen in these
Right.
next few months to years, but I think that
Mhm,
gives him a leg up for sure
mhm,
as we move forward. So I think we've spoken about a lot today.
mhm,
Going to wrap this up. It's been a little over almost 40 minutes at this point.
mhm,
And we like to keep this particular podcast down to 30 so that
mhm.
people can and take it take it all in, because we can talk for hours as we often do on long car rides, etc.
Mhm,
So keeping it tight here. Um, Thank
mhm.
you so much. Any last words that you'd like to say on Francis's legacy?
Oh,
Because
France.
I think we'll talk a lot about Leo moving forward. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure we take a beat for Francis.
How did people just loved him? You had 250,000 people, going to watch his funeral procession.
Yeah.
He just caught because he was honest and sincere. They criticized him for talking off the cuff too often, but people liked it. They liked it. It's kind of the way we all have to be. I think he had a heart that was open to. He was intelligent and wise, but he had a heart in the right place. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see
Take
you
care of
again.
yourself, Tim. Take care of yourself. Don't.
I will. Yeah, I'm
Do
back on my feet. Still, I'd say I'm at a little above 90% in terms
it.
of dealing with pain and other things.
Mhm.
But this is a big week for me as we are starting to launch our campaign. So
Okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
have a few parties, etc., and we'll start putting out more social media and things. So big week, and
Okay.
excited. Have a great team around me as well to effectuate that vision. So thank
Well,
you so much. Let's do it again next week.
right on. Okay. Blessings. Be bold. Be
Be
truthful.
bold. Be bold. Love it. All right. Talk to
Bye-bye.
you later.
Blessings. Bye-bye.